Abandoned on the battlefield, Zahari screamed as the codon blast tore through his insectoid body, his green blood pouring onto the war-torn dirt of planet Zafira. The young alien soldier knew he was dead as his Jaren squad retreated under heavy fire, leaving him to die alone and abandoned on the chaotic battlefield. But then a human silhouette emerged through the smoke. A human appears. Sergeant Jake Thompson, an Earth Alliance medic, sprinted through enemy lasers to Zachari's side. The human's calm, skilled hands immediately worked to slow the bleeding and dress the horrific wound. Jake knew that if he failed, the alien would die, and the fragile Jaren-human alliance could shatter. A critical decision. Codon soldiers closed in fast, and Jake faced an impossible choice. Jake gritted his teeth, making a split-second decision. He couldn't leave Zahari behind, not after everything they'd been through together. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and crouched down next to the wounded Zephyrin. A painful rescue. "This is going to hurt like hell, but I need you to stay with me, okay?" Jake said, locking eyes with Zachari. The alien nodded weakly, mandibles clicking. Jake hoisted Zachari up and over his shoulders in a fireman's carry, grunting with the effort. Zachari was heavy, his exoskeleton dense and armored, but Jake was strong, and he carried heavier loads before. He took a deep breath and started moving, keeping low to the ground. Navigating the battlefield. The battlefield was a maze of craters, burned-out vehicles, and rubble. Jake navigated through it all, relying on his months of experience on Zafira. He knew this terrain like the back of his hand. Laser blasts sizzled overhead as he ducked and weaved, Zahari's blood seeping into his uniform. An unlikely friendship. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Zachari asked, his voice strained and translated through Jake's earpiece. "I'm not one of your kind." "Doesn't matter," Jake panted, vaulting over a chunk of concrete. "I'm a medic. My job is to save lives, no matter what planet they're from." Zachari fell silent, contemplating this as Jake pushed onward. The human's strength and determination were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Most Zephyrin would have left him for dead, focusing on their own survival. But not Jake. Jake's background. As they skirted a bombed-out building, Jake spoke again. "You know, back on Earth, I was just a regular guy. Worked in a hospital, patched up people from all walks of life. Rich, poor, young, old. Didn't matter to me. I just wanted to help. And that is why you came to Zafira?" Zachari asked. Jake nodded. "When the Alliance put out the call for medics, I knew I had to step up. Couldn't just sit back and watch while people were dying out here." Unexpected compassion. Zachari marveled at the human's compassion. To risk one's life for complete strangers, for being so different from oneself, was a concept that few Zephyrin grasped. But Jake embodied it wholly. A deadly sniper. Suddenly, a laser blast struck the ground mere inches from Jake's boot. He cursed and dove for cover behind a rusted-out codon tank, setting Zachari down gently. "Sniper," he hissed, peeking around the edge of the tank. "Must have spotted us." Facing the enemy, another laser shot rang out, barely missing Jake's helmet. He flinched back, mind racing. They were so close to the base, but pinned down. He had to take out that sniper, or they'd never make it. Jake turned to Zachari, pressing a fresh bandage to the alien's wound. "Stay here and keep pressure on this. I'll deal with our friend up there." Zachari grabbed Jake's arm with a clawed hand. "No, you cannot face them alone." Jake grinned, a fierce light in his eyes. "Don't worry about me. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." He patted Zachari's shoulder reassuringly, then with a deep breath, sprinted out from behind the tank, drawing the sniper's fire. Taking out the sniper, laser scorched the earth at his feet as he zigzagged, searching for the telltale glint of a scope. There, in the third-story window of a ruined building, Jake raised his rifle and fired off a burst, the round sparking against the sniper's position. He dove and rolled, narrowly avoiding the answering shot. His heart pounded in his ears as he scrambled for new cover, knowing that he had to close the distance fast. A precise shot. Jake sprinted across the broken landscape, weaving between chunks of rubble as lasers sizzled overhead. He kept his rifle at the ready, eyes locked on the sniper's position. As he drew closer, he could see the glint of the codon's scope, the alien's insectoid form silhouetted against the shattered window. With a burst of speed, Jake lunged forward and rolled, coming up in a crouch behind a collapsed wall. He steadied his rifle against the stone, taking careful aim. The codon sniper was good, but Jake had been trained by the best. He drew in a breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, the round sparking off the sniper's helmet. The codon jerked back, mandibles flaring in surprise. Jake fired again, and this time, the shot found its mark. The sniper slumped over, rifle clattering to the ground below. A brief respite. Jake wasted no time. He sprinted back to the tank where Zachary lay waiting, green blood pooling beneath him. The Zephyrin's breath came in ragged gasps, his eyes glazed with pain. "I got him," Jake said, kneeling beside his friend. "Now let's get you out of here." He hoisted Zachary up once more, ignoring the burning in his muscles. The Chiron base was close now, just a few hundred meters away. Jake could see the glint of force fields, the flash of friendly weapons. Reaching the base, as he staggered through the gates, Chiron soldiers swarmed around him. They took Zachary from his arms, rushing the wounded soldier towards the medical facility. Jake followed close behind, his own fatigue forgotten. Inside the medbay, it was chaos. Zephyrin doctors and nurses rushed back and forth, tending to dozens of injured soldiers. Jake pushed his way through, Zachary's limp form cradled in his arms. "I need a table now," he shouted. A Zephyrin nurse gestured him over, mandibles clicking rapidly. Jake laid Zachary down gently, then turned to the assembled medical staff. "Desperate measures. He's got a laser wound to the abdomen, severe blood loss. I've slowed the bleeding, but he needs surgery stat." The Zephyrin doctors nodded, their compound eyes gleaming. They moved in, long-fingered hands already working to cut away Zachary's armor. Jake stepped back, letting them do their job, but he didn't go far. He hovered at the edge of the room, watching intently as they worked to save his friend's life. Hours passed. Jake paced the length of the medbay, ignoring the curious glances from passing soldiers. He couldn't rest, couldn't relax, until he knew Zachary was going to be okay. The waiting game. Finally, one of the doctors emerged, green-stained gloves held aloft. "The surgery was successful," he said, mandibles twitching in the Zephyrin equivalent of a smile. "Your friend will live." Jake sagged with relief, a grin splitting his face. "Thank you, Doc, really." A new respect. Word of Jake's actions spread like wildfire through the base. Everywhere he went, Zephyrin soldiers stopped to stare, to whisper amongst themselves. They had never seen a human risk so much for one of their own. It was unheard of, unprecedented. In the days that followed, as Zachary recovered, Jake rarely left his side. He sat with his friend, trading stories and jokes, learning more about Zephyrin culture. Zachary was eager to share, to teach Jake the ways of his people. "A bond forged in battle. You have earned great respect among my kind," Zachary said one day, his mandibles clicking softly. "What you did for me, it will not be forgotten." Jake ducked his head, embarrassed. "I was just doing my job, Zach. Anyone else would have done the same." But Zachary shook his head. "No, Jake, not anyone. You are unique, special. You have a heart unlike any I have encountered." A growing fret, a warm feeling bloomed in Jake's chest. He had come to Sapphira to make a difference, to help in any way he could. To know that he had succeeded, that he had touched the lives of these aliens, meant more than he could express. But their moment of peace was shattered by the blare of alarms. Jake leaped to his feet, hand already reaching for his rifle. He knew those alarms, knew what they meant. "The codon," Zachary hissed, struggling to sit up. "They're coming." Jake helped his friend to his feet, mind racing. The Codon had launched offensives before, but never on this scale. The entire base was mobilizing, soldiers rushing to their posts, weapons primed and ready. As Jake and Zachary made their way to the command center, the gravity of the situation became clear. A Codon fleet, larger than any seen before, was bearing down on them. The Zephyr-human alliance was about to face its greatest challenge yet. Jake tightened his grip on his rifle, determination hardening his features. They had fought too hard, come too far, to lose now. Together, he and Zachary would stand against the Codon threat. Together, they would fight for the future of their worlds. The Codon offensive. The command center buzzed with frantic energy as Jake and Zachary entered. Holographic maps displayed the advancing Codon fleet, red blips closing in on the base's perimeter. Officers barked orders, soldiers suited up, and the air was thick with tension. Preparing for battle, Jake scanned the room, spotting Colonel Haynes, the human officer in charge of the base's defenses. "Colonel, what's the situation?" he asked, moving quickly to her side. Haynes looked up from the map, her expression grim. "The Codon fleet is larger than anything we've faced before. They're hitting us from all sides. If we don't hold them off, the base will be overrun." A desperate plan. Zachary, still weak but determined, stepped forward. "What can we do to help?" he asked. Haynes studied the Zephyrin for a moment before nodding. "We need every able-bodied soldier on the front lines. Jake, Zachary, I need you two to lead a squad to reinforce the eastern perimeter. If the Codon break through there, it's over." Jake nodded, adrenaline surging through his veins. "We won't let that happen, Colonel. We'll hold the line." Rallying the troops. As they made their way to the eastern perimeter, Jake and Zachary rallied a group of soldiers, both human and Zephyrin. The mixed squad moved with a sense of urgency, knowing that their lives, and the lives of everyone on the base, depended on their actions. Holding the line, the eastern perimeter was already under heavy fire when they arrived. Codon soldiers, their insectoid bodies armored and bristling with weapons, advanced in waves. The defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, struggled to hold their ground. Jake took charge, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Form a defensive line. Hold your positions and don't let them break through." Fighting with determination, the squad followed his orders, digging in and returning fire with everything they had. Jake's rifle barked as he picked off Codon soldiers with deadly precision. Beside him, Zachary fought fiercely, his claws and energy weapons tearing through the enemy ranks. A relentless assault. Despite their best efforts, the Codon kept coming. Jake's heart pounded as he fought, every muscle straining to keep the enemy at bay. He glanced at Zachary, who was bleeding from multiple wounds but still fighting with unwavering determination. A turning point. Just as it seemed the Codon would overwhelm them, a deafening roar filled the air. Jake looked up to see a squadron of Zephyrin and human aircraft swooping in, unleashing a barrage of missiles and laser fire on the advancing Codon. The tide began to turn as the enemy was forced to retreat under the onslaught. A moment of respite. With the immediate threat pushed back, Jake and his squad took a moment to catch their breath. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, both friend and foe. Jake's heart ached for the lives lost, but he knew they couldn't afford to dwell on it. A new challenge. "Jake, we need to keep moving," Zachary said, his voice strained but resolute. "The Codon will regroup and attack again. We must be ready." Jake nodded, his determination renewed. "You're right. Let's fortify our position and prepare for the next wave." Fortifying the defense. They worked quickly, reinforcing their defenses and tending to the wounded. Jake's medical training proved invaluable as he patched up injured soldiers, keeping as many of them in the fight as possible. Zachary, despite his own injuries, helped coordinate their efforts, his tactical mind a vital asset. A formidable ally. As the day wore on, the Codon launched wave after wave of attacks, But each time, Jake and Zakhari's squad held firm. The bond between the human and Zephyran soldiers grew stronger with each battle, their shared determination and courage forging an unbreakable unity. An unexpected revelation. During a brief lull in the fighting, Zakhari turned to Jake, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Jake, there's something you should know. The Kodan are not just fighting for conquest. They are searching for something they believe is hidden on Zephyra." Jake frowned, his mind racing. What could they possibly be looking for that's worth all this destruction? A mysterious artifact. Zakhari's eyes darkened. An ancient artifact said to hold immense power. The Kodan believe it will give them the ability to dominate the galaxy. Jake's heart skipped a beat. If they find it, they'll be unstoppable. We have to find it first. A new mission. As the next wave of Kodan attacks began, Jake and Zakhari knew their mission had just become even more critical. They weren't just fighting to protect the base. They were fighting to prevent a catastrophe that could engulf the entire galaxy. A determined resolve. With renewed determination, they prepared to face the Kodan once more. Together, they would stand against the darkness, fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their worlds. The battle was far from over, but Jake and Zakhari were ready for whatever came next. The search for the artifact. As the battle raged on, Jake and Zakhari knew they had to act quickly. They couldn't afford to wait for the Kodan to regroup and launch another assault. With the immediate threat temporarily under control, they assembled a small team and prepared to venture into the depths of Zephyra to find the ancient artifact before the Kodan could claim it. Gathering intel, Jake and Zakhari met with Colonel Haynes to discuss their plan. "We need to find that artifact and secure it before the Kodan do," Jake said, his voice resolute. "Do we have any leads on where it might be?" Haynes nodded, pulling up a holographic map of the planet. "Our intelligence suggests that the artifact is located in the ruins of an ancient Zephyran temple, deep within the jungle. It's a dangerous journey, but it's our best shot." A dangerous journey. The team, comprised of both human and Zephyran soldiers, set out at dawn. They moved quickly through the dense jungle, their senses on high alert. The Kodan were relentless, and they knew they could be ambushed at any moment. An unexpected encounter. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, the team encountered a group of Zephyran elders. The elders, who had been hiding from the Kodan, were initially wary of the newcomers. But Zakhari's presence reassured them, and they agreed to guide the team to the temple. Ancient secrets. The journey was treacherous, filled with natural hazards and the ever-present threat of Kodan scouts. But with the elders' guidance, they finally reached the ancient temple. The structure was massive, its weathered stone walls covered in intricate carvings that told the story of the Zephyran civilization. Unlocking the temple. The entrance to the temple was sealed, but the elders revealed a hidden mechanism that unlocked the massive stone door. As it slowly creaked open, Jake and Zakhari led the way inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The heart of the temple. The interior of the temple was awe-inspiring. Massive statues of ancient Zephyran deities lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders. At the center of the chamber, atop a stone pedestal, rested the artifact, a crystalline orb that glowed with an otherworldly light. A moment of triumph. Jake approached the pedestal, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. He reached out and carefully lifted the orb, its surface cool and smooth to the touch. As he held it, he could feel a faint hum of energy coursing through it. "We did it," Zakhari said, his voice filled with awe. "We found the artifact." The Kodan arrived. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. A thunderous explosion rocked the temple, and the entrance collapsed in a shower of rubble. Kodan soldiers poured into the chamber, weapons drawn and mandibles clicking in fury. A desperate escape. Jake and Zakhari fought desperately, their team forming a defensive perimeter around the artifact. The battle was fierce, but the Kodan were relentless. As the situation grew dire, Jake knew they had to escape with the artifact at all costs. A final stand, fall back, Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. We need to get the artifact out of here. The team retreated, fighting their way through the Kodan soldiers. As they neared the collapsed entrance, Zakhari activated a hidden passageway revealed by the elders. The team scrambled through the narrow tunnel, the Kodan hot on their heels. Emerging into the light, the tunnel led them to a hidden exit on the far side of the temple. As they emerged into the light, the Kodan in pursuit, they knew they couldn't stop running. Jake clutched the artifact tightly, determined to protect it at all costs. A new threat, but as they raced through the jungle, a new threat loomed on the horizon. A massive Kodan warship hovered above, its weapons trained on the fleeing team. The Kodan were determined to capture the artifact, no matter the cost. The fight continues. With the artifact in their possession, Jake and Zakhari knew they had to reach the safety of the base. The fate of their worlds depended on it. The jungle echoed with the sounds of battle as they fought their way back, determined to protect the ancient power they had uncovered. The battle was far from over, but Jake and Zakhari were ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would stand against the darkness, fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their worlds. The artifact's power was a beacon of hope, and they would do whatever it took to keep it from falling into the hands of the Kodan. The flight from the jungle. Racing against time, Jake, Zakhari, and their team ran through the dense jungle, the artifact clutched tightly in Jake's arms. The Kodan warship hovered ominously above, its searchlights sweeping through the trees. The roar of its engines sent flocks of birds scattering into the sky. A harrowing escape. We need to move faster. Jake shouted over the noise. That warship won't stop until it has the artifact. Zakhari, despite his injuries, pushed ahead, leading the way through the thick underbrush. This way. There's a river up ahead. We can use it to lose them. Into the water. The team reached the riverbank, the rushing water offering a potential escape route. Without hesitation, they plunged into the river, letting the current carry them downstream. The cold water was a shock to their systems, but it provided a brief respite from the relentless pursuit. A narrow escape. The Kodan soldiers reached the riverbank just as Jake and his team were swept around a bend, disappearing from sight. The warship's searchlights scoured the water, but the team had gone under the cover of dense foliage. For the moment, they were safe. Regrouping, they emerged from the river several miles downstream, exhausted and soaked, but alive. Jake carefully unwrapped the artifact, ensuring it was undamaged. Its eerie glow was a reminder of the power they now held and the danger it represented. Seeking refuge. We can't stay here, Jake said, catching his breath. The Kodan will keep searching for us. We need to find shelter and figure out our next move. Zakhari nodded, his eyes scanning the surrounding jungle. There's an old Zephyran outpost nearby. It should provide some cover until we can get back to the base. The outpost. The outpost was a crumbling structure hidden deep within the jungle, overgrown with vines and moss. It offered little in the way of comfort, but it was defensible and hidden from aerial surveillance. The team set up a makeshift camp, tending to their wounds and resting briefly, formulating a plan. As they sat around a small fire, Jake and Zakhari discussed their next steps. We need to get the artifact back to the base, Jake said, but the Kodan won't stop until they find us. We need a distraction. Zakhari's eyes lit up with an idea. The outpost has an old communications array. If we can get it working, we can send a false signal, leading the Kodan away from us. A risky gamble. It was a risky plan, but they had few options. While the rest of the team rested, Jake and Zakhari worked on repairing the communications array. It was ancient and barely functional, but with some ingenuity and determination, they managed to get it online. The decoy signal. Jake transmitted a decoy signal, making it appear as though they were several miles away, deep in another part of the jungle. Almost immediately, the warship changed course, heading towards the false location. A moment of hope. "It worked," Zakhari said, relief evident in his voice. "But we need to move quickly. The Kodan will realize it's a trick eventually." Returning to base, under cover of darkness, the team left the outpost and began the long trek back to the base. They moved swiftly and silently, every sense alert for any sign of the Kodan. The jungle was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, adding to the tension. A heartfelt conversation. As they walked, Jake and Zakhari found themselves at the back of the group, a rare moment of quiet allowing them to speak freely. "Zakhari, I have to ask," Jake began, his voice low. "Why did you risk everything to help us? You could have stayed hidden, safe." Zakhari's eyes softened. "Because this isn't just about humans or Zephyrans. It's about all of us. If the Kodan get that artifact, no one will be safe. And because I believe in you, Jake. I've seen your courage and your heart. I know you'll do what's right." Strengthening bonds? Jake was deeply moved by Zakhari's words. "Thank you, Zakhari. I won't let you down. We'll get through this together." Nearing the base, as dawn approached, the team finally saw the silhouette of the base in the distance. They were weary and battered, but they had made it. The sight of the base was a beacon of hope, a reminder that their fight was far from over. A warm welcome. The base's defenses opened up to let them in, and they were greeted by Colonel Haynes and the other soldiers. There were cheers and tears of relief as the team was welcomed back. The artifact was immediately taken to a secure location, its importance clear to everyone. Preparing for the final battle, Colonel Haynes approached Jake and Zakhari, her expression serious. "You've done well, but this isn't over. The Kodan will come for us, and we need to be ready." Jake nodded, his resolve firm. "We'll be ready. We have the artifact, and we have each other. We'll fight with everything we have, united in purpose." The base buzzed with activity as preparations for the final battle began. Soldiers armed themselves, fortifications were reinforced, and strategies were discussed. The bond between the human and Zephyran soldiers had never been stronger, united by their shared purpose and determination. A beacon of hope. As the sun rose, casting its light over the jungle and the base, there was a sense of calm before the storm. The artifact's glow was a symbol of hope and a reminder of the power they had to protect. Together, they stood ready to face the Kodan, determined to protect their worlds and each other. The final battle was approaching, and with it, the fate of their future. But Jake, Zakhari, and their united forces were ready to stand against the darkness, fighting not just for survival, but for a future where peace and unity could prevail. The siege begins. A call to arms. The calm before the storm was brief. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the Kodan warships appeared on the horizon, a dark swarm blotting out the light. Alarms blared throughout the base, and soldiers rushed to their positions. The final battle was about to begin. Stealing themselves. Jake and Zakhari stood side by side, each manning a defensive position. The artifact was securely hidden, but its power resonated through the base, a beacon of hope and strength. "Remember," Jake said to his team, "we fight for our future, for our homes, and for each other. Stay strong and stay united." The first assault. The Kodan warships opened fire, their energy weapons scorching the ground and tearing through the jungle. The base's defenses retaliated, heavy artillery and energy cannons blazing. The air was filled with the deafening roar of battle, the sky lit by the flashes of explosions. Holding the line, Jake, Zakhari, and their team fought with everything they had. The Kodan soldiers were relentless, but the defenders were determined. Trenches were dug, barriers erected, and every inch of ground was contested fiercely. Despite the chaos, the bond between the human and Zephyran soldiers held strong. A heroic stand. Amidst the fury of battle, Zakhari proved to be a formidable warrior. Despite his injuries, he fought with unmatched ferocity, rallying the troops and leading daring counterattacks. His presence on the battlefield was a beacon of inspiration, driving the defenders to fight even harder. A dire situation. As the hours wore on, the situation grew increasingly dire. The Khodan forces were vast, their numbers seemingly endless. Despite their best efforts, the defenders were being pushed back, their lines beginning to falter. The Khodan warships hovered menacingly overhead, their firepower overwhelming. A desperate plan. Seeing the dire situation, Jake knew they needed to take drastic action. He gathered his closest allies, including Zachary and Colonel Haynes. "We can't hold them off much longer," Jake said, his voice grim. "We need to use the artifact." "A dangerous mission," Colonel Haynes nodded. "Agreed, but using the artifact here could destroy everything. We need to lure the Khodan away from the base." Jake looked to Zachary. "Are you with me?" Zachary's eyes burned with determination. "Always." The decoy. The plan was set. Jake and Zachary would take the artifact and draw the Khodan forces away from the base, giving the defenders a chance to regroup and fortify their positions. It was a dangerous mission, but there was no other choice. Into the fray. With the artifact in hand, Jake and Zachary set off, slipping through the chaos of the battlefield. They moved quickly and quietly, avoiding the main conflict zones. The Khodan warships continued their assault on the base, unaware of the decoy mission unfolding beneath them. Drawing the enemy. Once they were a safe distance from the base, Jake activated the artifact, its glow intensifying. The energy signature immediately drew the attention of the Khodan warships, their sensors locking onto the powerful signal. The ships began to break off from their assault, turning towards Jake and Zachary. A race against time. With the Khodan forces in pursuit, Jake and Zachary raced through the jungle, the artifact's glow lighting their way. The warships followed, their engines roaring overhead. The chase was relentless, the ground shaking with the force of the pursuing Khodan. A narrow escape. As they reached a clearing, Jake and Zachary knew they had to act fast. They found a narrow ravine, a natural choke point that could buy them some time. With the Khodan forces closing in, they set up a defensive position, ready to make their stand. A fierce battle. The Khodan soldiers descended upon them, a relentless wave of attackers. Jake and Zachary fought with everything they had, the artifact's energy bolstering their strength. The battle was fierce and brutal, but they held their ground, determined to protect the artifact at all costs. Reinforcements arrive. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, a group of Saphiran warriors emerged from the jungle, their arrival turning the tide of battle. Led by a formidable Saphiran commander, the reinforcements joined Jake and Zachary, their combined strength pushing back the Khodan forces. A moment of triumph. With the reinforcements' help, Jake and Zachary managed to drive the Khodan soldiers back, forcing them to retreat. The warships, seeing their ground forces repelled, began to withdraw, their engines roaring as they retreated into the sky. The immediate threat had been averted, but the war was far from over. Returning to base, exhausted but victorious, Jake and Zachary, along with the Saphiran reinforcements, made their way back to the base. They were greeted with cheers and relief, their successful mission a beacon of hope for the defenders. The artifact was once again secured, its power a reminder of the strength and unity of their cause. Preparing for the final confrontation. As the base regrouped and tended to the wounded, Jake and Zachary met with Colonel Haynes and the Saphiran commander. "We bought ourselves some time," Jake said, "but the Khodan will be back. We need to prepare for the final confrontation." "A united front," Colonel Haynes nodded. "We have reinforcements now, and we know the Khodan won't give up easily. But together, we can stand against them. We'll fight with everything we have." Hope and determination. As the sun set, casting its golden light over the jungle, there was a renewed sense of hope and determination. The defenders were battered but unbroken, united in their fight for a future free from the Khodan threat. Jake, Zachary, and their allies stood ready, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The final battle was approaching, and with it the chance to secure their future. They had the artifact, their courage, and the strength of their unity. And with that, they would stand against the darkness, fighting for a world where peace and unity could prevail. The final stand, a night of vigilance. The night was tense, filled with anticipation and preparation. Soldiers and allies worked tirelessly, reinforcing defenses, treating the wounded and strategizing for the impending battle. The base buzzed with a mix of urgency and hope, the air thick with the weight of what was to come. Allies from afar. As dawn approached, more Saphiran reinforcements arrived. Led by high-ranking officials who had been monitoring the situation, they brought advanced weaponry and supplies, boosting the defenders' morale. The sight of these new allies rekindled hope, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. A plan of action. In the command center, Jake, Zachary, Colonel Haynes, and the Saphiran commanders gathered around a holographic map of the battlefield. "We need to use the artifact strategically," one of the Saphiran commanders suggested. "Its power can turn the tide, but we must be careful." A bold strategy. Jake nodded. "We'll use it to disrupt their command structure. If we can take out their leaders, we might force a retreat. But we need to protect the artifact at all costs." Preparing for battle. As the sun rose, casting its first light on the jungle, the defenders took their positions. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, each soldier knowing the importance of the coming hours. Jake and Zachary, now veterans of countless battles, moved among the troops, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. The enemy approaches. The Khadan forces arrived with the dawn, their warships darkening the sky once more. The ground trembled under the weight of their advance. This time, the defenders were ready, fortified, and prepared for the final stand. The battle begins. The clash was immediate and fierce. Energy weapons lit up the battlefield, explosions rocked the ground, and the air was filled with the sounds of war. The defenders fought with everything they had, their resolve unshaken by the overwhelming enemy forces. Jake and Zachary's mission. Amid the chaos, Jake and Zachary set out with a small team, the artifact securely in their possession. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Khadan command center and use the artifact to disrupt their operations. It was a dangerous task, but one they were prepared to face. Infiltrating the enemy. Under the cover of the battle, Jake, Zachary, and their team moved stealthily through the jungle, avoiding the main conflict zones. They encountered Khadan patrols, engaging in quick, silent skirmishes to avoid drawing attention. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the Khadan forces. A critical point. Reaching the outskirts of the Khadan command center, the team paused. The artifact's energy pulsated, ready to unleash its power. Jake looked at his team. "This is it. We move fast and strike hard. No hesitation." The attack. They launched their assault, taking the Khadan command center by surprise. The artifact's power surged, disabling Khadan technology and causing chaos among their ranks. The team fought their way through, targeting key positions and leaders. Turning the tide. The disruption caused by the artifact had an immediate effect on the battlefield. The Khadan forces, suddenly leaderless and disoriented, faltered. The defenders seized the opportunity, launching a coordinated counterattack. The tide of the battle began to turn. A heroic sacrifice. In the midst of the chaos, Zachary found himself facing the Khadan leader. The battle was fierce, the stakes higher than ever. In a final, desperate move, Zachary used the artifact's power to neutralize the leader, but at a great cost. The energy backlash injured Zachary severely, his strength waning. Victory and loss. With the Khadan leader defeated and their forces in disarray, the battle began to shift decisively in favor of the defenders. The Khadan warships retreated, their ground forces scattering. The defenders had won, but the victory was bittersweet. Farewell to a hero. Jake rushed to Zathari's side, finding his friend gravely injured but alive. "You did it," Jake said, his voice choked with emotion. "We won." Zathari smiled weakly. "We did it together. Promise me, you'll keep fighting for peace." Jake nodded, tears in his eyes. "I promise." A new dawn. The battle was over, and the Khodan threat had been repelled. The defenders, though weary and battered, stood victorious. The artifact had been instrumental in their success, but it was the unity and courage of the human and Zephyran soldiers that truly made the difference. A future of hope. As they tended to the wounded and began rebuilding, there was a renewed sense of hope and determination. The battle had forged a bond between the humans and Zephyrans, a partnership that promised a brighter future. Jake, now a respected leader, stood ready to guide them towards peace and unity. The artifact, once a symbol of unknown power, had become a beacon of hope, and with it, they would continue to fight for a world where different species could coexist in harmony, free from the shadow of war. Epilogue. A promise kept. Years later, under the peaceful skies of a united planet, a memorial stood in honor of those who had fought and sacrificed. Among the names etched in stone was Zathari's, a hero who had given everything for a future of peace. Jake stood before the memorial, a leader and a guardian of the promise he had made. The artifact, now safely stored, remained a symbol of their unity and strength. And as long as it was needed, he would continue to fight for the peace they had all dreamed of. The battle had been won, but the journey towards a lasting peace was just beginning. And with every step, the memory of their struggle and their victories would guide them towards a brighter future.